Welcome to today's webinar, the ISO 27000 standards and the MLPS 2.0 overlaps and differences. My name is Mareike Seselberg. I'm manager at CHINABRAND IP Consulting GmbH, and I will be presenting this webinar to you today. Please be informed we have a newsletter, CHINABRAND News, for which you can register on our website, chinabrand.com. So this webinar will last for around 20 to 30 minutes, and therefore we'll directly jump into the content. So what are the topics today? The idea of this webinar is to help companies who already have a global information security strategy, which is built based on the ISO 27000 standard series. We have got a lot of questions from our clients in this regard, clients who are not sure if there are differences between MLPS and the ISO 27000 or what they need to pay attention to if they want to implement the MLPS in China. So this is why we will be talking about the differences between these two standards in regard of the methodology and also the control level today. The aim is that after this webinar you have a basic knowledge of differences and know what to pay attention to. So let's start with a short overview over the standards we will be talking about today. So what you can see here is a list of the standards included into the 27000 standards family. So we have different standards. We have one for terminology, we have standards defining the requirements, we have general guides, and we have industry guides for certain industries. And you can see below a list of all these standards, and the ones in the green and red boxes are actually standards with contents that are also included into the MLPS. But as we do not have a lot of time today, we will first focus on the basic standards. So in this webinar, we will only be talking about a comparison of the standards that you can find in the green boxes. All the standards that are not in any of the boxes actually contain content that you won't be finding in the MLPS standards. So only the standards in the boxes are similar or contain content that you can also find in the MLPS. So here comes the overview for the MLPS, the multi-level protection scheme, and the related standards and laws. So one big difference is that the MLPS is actually a legal obligation. So the CSL, the cybersecurity law in China, actually gives you a legal obligation to conduct the multi-level protection scheme. The details how to conduct it and how audits will take place can be found in several standards, as you can see them listed here. And same as with the ISO 27000 standards, there are parts of the MLPS which cannot be found in the ISO 27000. And the parts in the box, you see the four standards, contain information or contain regulations that you can also find in the ISO 27000 series. And we will today be talking about the four standards, or compare the four standards with the ISO 27000 that you can find in the green box. Below in the graphic, in the table, you can see also see what we will be talking about today. So we will be mainly talking or comparing the technical requirements and the management requirements, which define the requirements for level 2 and level 3 in the MLPS. So for those of you who are not so familiar with the MLPS at the moment, the MLPS differentiates between 5 different levels of IT systems, starting from level 1 systems, which are not really important, to level 5 systems, which are extremely important. And most Western companies engaging in business in China will have systems from level 1 to level 3. We won't be talking about level 1 because level 1 systems, for level 1 systems, actually the MLPS is not necessary. So we will be talking about the requirements for level 2 and level 3 systems. What we will be not talking about is the extended security requirements for cloud computing, mobile internet, IoT, and industry control. These contents can also be found in the ISO 27000 series, but it goes too deep for now. Maybe we will have a more detailed webinar on these topics some other day, but today we will mainly focus on basic requirements. So let's start with differences between MLPS and the ISO 27000 standards. So we have different protection objects. What does it mean? The MLPS focuses very much on IT systems. So you first actually need a list of the IT systems that you have, and then for each IT system you will take the necessary steps. These IT systems include different technologies, and the definition of IT system actually has getting increasingly complex, or has started to include increasingly complex systems. So you can see in 1994, when the MLPS was first mentioned, the protection objects for the MLPS mainly were computer information systems. In 2003, it was extended to basic information networks, important information networks. And in 2017, the IT systems now are defined as important network facilities as well as important information systems. What does it include? It mainly includes general information systems, information networks, but also mobile system, industrial control system, cloud systems, IoT, and big data systems. So the focus is very much on one IT system. For the ISO 27000 series, the protection object is actually data, or let's say information. And the aim is to keep them confidential, to guarantee the integrity and availability of it. And the main mechanism behind that is the PDCA cycle that you all know. So a company gets input, gets requirements and expectations regarding information security from different stakeholders, and will then build up ISMS system around that, with the output being a controlled information security. But as you see, I mean, it's a cycle, so it's not like I just check one IT system after the other and implement some measures and then I'm done. But the aim is to constantly improve the complete system to protect my data. So you can see here the perspective from which the security of data, or the IT security, is seen is different. I'm not saying that the results are necessarily very different, but the perspective from which you have to start thinking about implementing MLPS and ISO 27000 are different. We also have different implementation processes. I already mentioned that the MLPS is very much focused on IT systems. So for the implementation of the MLPS, the focus is mainly on the life cycle of the IT system, starting from the plan, what IT system I want to implement and how this can be done in a secure way, the implementation, then of course the operation. This is, as you can see, the list is quite long, is obviously the most important part, and the part where most security measures have to be taken and controls and monitoring has to take place. And then we also have the termination, of an IT system or the termination of parts of an IT system, including requirements regarding the disposal of storage media and so on. So we do not have we have a clear focus on the IT system really from the beginning to the very end. While for the ISO 27000, the focus is on the ISMS system itself and the PDCA cycle taking place. So of course, also here we start with planning. So we will design ISMS policy, guidelines, procedures, and processes, which then will be implemented with corresponding controls and so on. In the check part of the PDCA cycle, assessments of execution and effectiveness will take place, and then I will regularly have to check if I can improve anything. And while I'm not saying that for the MLPS it is not required to improve your security system, it is not encouraged that much, or it is not necessary that much. For the MLPS, you only need to change the security measures that you have taken when there have been relevant change to the IT system itself. Like, for example, implementing new hardware or software to it, or when the amount of data that will be processed by the system changes in a relevant way. We also see differences regarding the system classification and risk rating. So for the MLPS, the level of a system is mainly decided based on external impact of this system. So that means what you have to consider when deciding which level an IT system is in, you have first to consider legitimate rights and interests of citizens, legal persons and other organizations, public order and national security. You do not have necessarily to consider your internal interest in the company. So this is a very external way of viewing the risk. So this is how you decide the system level, and then you do a gap analysis as is to the MLPS requirements, and you will produce a security requirement report. For the ISO 27000 series, you have a very much internal way of analyzing the risks related to certain protection objects. This does not mean that this will not include external factors. Most companies, of course, will also consider what damage would be done if, for example, personal data of their clients is leaked and so on. But there is no purely external way to assess the risks. So the main parts that you probably will consider is business impacts. Also, as I already said, this might include some external factors. You will assess the risk on a qualitative and quantitative basis, and you will also take into consideration the organization's general risk appetite. So there's a lot more freedom here. You have you can make your own choices how to weigh certain risks. And then, of course, you can also more freely choose the risk treatment method and security measures. This is also a very big difference between these two standards that I will also be mentioning later on again. As an MLPS is a legal obligation, so there must be very detailed requirements that you have to implement, while the ISO 27000 is sort of a guideline and gives you more freedom to choose the risk treatment methods. Here you can see a comparison of the contents of these standards. Of course, only the parts that were marked in the first few slides that I showed you. And you can see that there is no way to really put these two standards next to each other and then directly compare it, because a lot of the content that we will find is not mirrored by the other standard. So for example, if you see here in the MLPS, the part about security, organization and personnel, if you want to find it in the ISO 27000 standard, you have to read two parts of it. Like you can see here the 8.6 information security organization, as well as the 8.7 personnel security. Or for example, the security operation management, you can find this content in the ISO 27000 in the A8 asset management, the A12 operation security, and so on. So a direct comparison of the requirements would take a lot of time, and it makes more sense to only check for a concrete requirement that you want to find, and not to do a general comparison. We have differences in the control elements. So you can see here for the ISO 27002, you have 14 control areas, 35 control elements, and 14 control points. The purpose being implementation of a suitable and appropriate ISMS. You can see here for the MLPS level 2, we have 8 control areas, 69 control elements, and 147 control points. Of course, this terminology, control area, control elements, control points, comes from the ISO standard series. It's not used in the MLPS, but it can be still can be called like that, actually. So the control elements that you see listed here are the ones that cannot be found in the ISO 27002. You can also see that from the MLPS level 2 to the MLPS level 3, we see a huge increase of control points. So the higher the level of the MLPS system, the more requirements are there that you have to follow. And actually this means a lot, because you have to implement them. It's a legal obligation. So it makes a big difference if your system in China is being defined as level 2 or as level 3. So let's talk about how these two systems can be combined then. Of course, this has to be made on a factual basis. So there is no general solution to this. But there are parts where the MLPS can be used to refine the ISO 27000 ISMS system. So there are parts where the requirements in the MLPS are much more detailed than in the ISO 27000 series. So therefore, the MLPS requirements can be taken into the ISMS system. And there are areas where this is very much supplementary. So where you have requirements in both of these standards that can be combined very well and give you even higher security. Of course, you will have to make certain compromises. This is also due to the fact that the MLPS is a legal requirement. So if some parts of the requirements of the MLPS actually does not suit very well into your global ISMS, then you do not have the choice to say, I just don't follow this requirements. The only way to do that is via, well, the only way to do it is that there is no requirement to really 100% be compliant with the MLPS, but you have a certain freedom to choice not to fulfill some of the requirements. However, this is more theoretical than practical, as this, there is a rule of thumb saying that if you fulfill like 70 to 80% of the MLPS, and if you have mitigated all high risks as they will be identified by the test center or the auditor, you can pass the MLPS. So actually, there might be some things in the MLPS that you won't need to implement directly, but this is not something that you can count on. How can an integrated implementation process be like? So as the MLPS is a legal requirement, the first thing you should consider, at least for China, is the MLPS. So you will need to do the IT system classification as a first step. Then you can identify the protection objects, also according to the ISO 27000 standards. There might be some objects that are same with the MLPS, but there might be other objects that are not part of the MLPS and that still need to be included into your ISMS. So the MLPS will give you the basic security requirements as you see them here, which will go directly into the security requirements, let's call it list, that you can see here on the right hand side in orange. And additionally to this, you should also do threats, vulnerabilities, and asset assessment as you would do it according to the 27000 standards, and conduct a risk analysis for threats, vulnerabilities, and assets that you have. And your result of this will be a risk list, which you can also then add to the security requirements that you have here on the right hand side. And we also added another box you can see in blue, the stakeholder security strategy. So you should also consider your general security strategy when drawing up the security requirements list. However, please make sure that this will not lead to you neglecting any requirements from the MLPS, as once again they are legally legal obligation for you to implement. So to summarize, the ISO 27000 series these are international standards which help you to set up a suitable information security management system. The MLPS, in contrast, is a legally binding system with very specific technical requirements for IT systems, which needs to be followed. So this is not optional. There must not be a conflict between MLPS and ISO 27000 based ISMS in China. As the MLPS goes more into technical details, you just have to find a way to implement this into your ISMS based on the ISO 27000. There must not be a conflict. If there is no existing ISMS for now, you should be aware that the first step for China definitely is conducting the MLPS. The MLPS is a legal requirement for more than 4 years now already. So companies who haven't started conducting the MLPS should start with that first, and then after this has been done, can set up a complete ISMS on top of this based on the ISO 27000 series. So yeah, that's actually it. I hope you have gotten a basic overview over these two standards. Please, if you have any further questions, feel free to reach out to us at any time. And yeah, you can find the contact data here. And I wish you a nice and pleasant further day. Thank you and bye-bye.